Thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm Chris Rovzar. I'm the editorial director of Bloomberg Pursuits, which is the luxury department here at Bloomberg. We're putting on this conference today, and we feel very lucky to start with this lunch with this incredible crew to talk about social programs for sustainable growth. These people are from companies and organizations that are big enough to have really impactful social programs that help the communities around their supply chain and programs that really work on sustainability in a meaningful way that affects all of their companies. So I'm going to do a little brief introduction to these guys, and then we'll get into it. So on the far end there is Jean-Marc Lieberherr, who is the CEO of the Diamond Producers Association. They are our sponsors today, so thank you so much for helping us put this together. The DPA is an international alliance of the world's leading diamond companies, united in their commitment to best-in-class ethical and sustainable operations and transparent business practices. Together, DPA members represent 75% of the world's diamonds production. The Dpa mission is to protect and promote the integrity and reputation of diamonds and of the diamond industry. Jean-Marc actually co-founded the DPA and moved into this role after working at DPA member Rio Tinto Diamonds for more than a decade. Next to him is Oliver Bonke, who is the regional CEO for Shangri-La hotels in the Middle East, Europe, India, and the Americas. Shangri-La runs 5-star luxury hotels in the premier cities in the world and in exotic resort locations. Oliver is responsible for driving growth in these regions, including new investments, asset management, new partnerships, and improving hotel excellence. He has 30 years of experience in the hotel industry and has been chief commercial officer at Lowe's and Intercontinental in the Americas. And then we have Amandine Robin, who is the SVP for Corporate Sustainability and Responsibility in North America for Pernod Ricard, the spirits company that owns iconic brands like Absolut, Chivas, Jameson, Havana Club, Perrier-Jouet Champagne, and a lot more things that we all enjoy. Amandine oversees communications in the region and has personally brought sustainability and corporate social responsibility into the comms portfolio. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Really, really excited to have you here. I'd like to start with each of the panelists telling us a little bit about their company's social agenda, especially what you're most proud of. So I'd love to start with you, Amandine. Can you tell us about Pernod Ricard's sustainability and responsibility roadmap?
Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here. So I think when it comes to Pernod Ricard and you think of wine and spirits, traditionally what sustainability was about responsible drinking, and you think of this advertising, please drink responsibly. And that was traditionally what the industry was doing, and we wanted to go much beyond that in terms of our sustainability agenda. We shared last year our 2030 sustainability and responsibility roadmap. And that roadmap is based on 4 pillars where we believe it's touching our entire business from what we call from grain to glass, the full production until you actually sip the product. The first pillar we have is around nurturing terroir. So, our Jameson whiskey is made in Ireland. Our Absolut Vodka is made in Sweden. Our Martell cognac is made in Cognac, France. And so we have so much impact on those local communities. And so we want to make sure that we have an impact there. So what we do is that actually we tax ourselves. We look at our carbon footprint, and we tax ourselves $100 per ton of carbon that we give back to the communities where we operate. So that's one pillar. The second one is this notion of circular making, if you're familiar with it. But linear is the idea that you produce a product, you put it out there, and you create waste. Circular making follows the natural cycle of resources and plants and trees. So imagine that it's a full circle. So we produce something, but the waste or everything that's created is used back. So there's never any waste throughout. So we're trying to look at our production with that circular concept. And one of the ways that we do that is actually in the distillation process. One of the ways that we create is amazing food for cattle with the farmers that we work with. So we're able to not create waste and actually give it back to them. And then the third pillar is valuing people. So we want to look at not only our employees, but all the people that we impact throughout that journey. So that starts with the farmers that we work with that do not belong to our company, but are partners for generations in terms of the grains that they do. We look at our employees. We look at distributors that will take our products and bring them to restaurants and stores, and then also bartenders that are the last person that are going to talk to you consumers around equality in the industry, harassment in bars, and so and for employees we talk about equality, equal pay, diversity in an industry that's traditionally male. So we really look at what's relevant for people throughout that chain. And then the last pillar that, of course, are started with, which is still very important for us, is this notion of responsible hosting. And with that, we are one of the founding members of the Foundation for Advancing Alcohol Responsibility, also known as responsibility.org. If you have young children, I highly recommend this resource on how you can talk to your children as parents, which in the age between 10 and 15 is where you have the most influence. Yes, yeah. Parents are the most 15. Essential. After 15, it's too late. But with this organization since 1991 that it was created, we have drunk driving that has decreased by 41%, and underage drinking has decreased by 38%. So lots of great work done. So it's a very ambitious roadmap looking at the full picture, and the United Nations recognized us as the only beverage company, alcohol and non-alcohol company, as a global compact organization, meaning that we have an ambitious roadmap that is supporting the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Only 200 companies are selected, so very proud of that. So now we have the ambition, now we need to execute.
Very ambitious. Jean-Marc, you and I have talked about how diamonds are a luxury. They're not a necessity. How do you approach your responsibilities there and to the production process and community partnerships in the environment?
Right. Yeah, I think the fact that our product is meant to be a symbol of love and purity and sincerity really means that we've got to be held up to the light as an industry. And God knows that the diamond industry has got quite a lot of legacy issues to deal with. So I'm not necessarily going to kind of dwell on those. We can come back to them later, but I'll tell you about how the diamond miners approach sustainability in general. And to understand that, you've got to try to imagine what it takes to mine a diamond ore body and where that happens and what are the different steps to getting there. And most of the diamond mines are in highly remote locations. I used to run a diamond business for Rio Tinto. We had a mine in northern Canada, in Northwest Territories, 250 kilometers north of Yellowknife, if any of you have been to Yellowknife, one of the most pristine environments on Earth. We had another mine in Western Australia, between Broome and Perth somewhere, one of the most remote places in the world again, and another mine in Zimbabwe, surrounded with villages. So when you don't decide where you're going to mine, you mine where you find diamonds. So you're basically landed with a land, a community that usually lives there, or at least has got some historical rights on the land and depends on it for a living, whether it's fishing or hunting or what. And an environment that is very often very sensitive. So the whole process of building a mine and operating a mine actually is about managing these constraints. And today there is absolutely, you've got a government, of course, that wants to have his share of the cake. So it's impossible today to run a diamond mine or to build a diamond mine without first establishing clear rules of the game in partnership. Win-win partnership with local communities, and take lots of different forms. It can be participation agreement by which they get a share in the proceeds. In any case, it means employment agreement. When you start a mine in a place like Western Australia, you've got to hire from the local communities. You got about 90% of employees who are from the area. You're going to be there 30, 40, 50 years. You're not going to import people from outside. You're going to take people who are there. You're going to train them. You take them to school. And often you're going to end up having 2 generations or more working in your mine. So this whole partnership with local communities, bringing them into the fold and making them benefit from an employment, but a development and education point of view is really, really important. You can't have a mine without the resources to mine it and without the partnership with the communities. On the environmental side, same thing. I think there is very few industries that are under so much scrutiny from an environmental point of view. Before you even start mining, you've got to sign an environmental agreement with the local communities and the government. And then you've got very often a multi-party environmental board that actually supervises what you're doing, which is part government and part local communities. When I was in northern Canada, every now and then we'd take the elders out fishing, and they'd eat the fish, they'd put it on the barbecue and check that it tasted the way that it tasted when they were kids, to see there was no impact on the water. And this kind of partnership is really, really important. We had to demonstrate that we're not going to be changing the caribou migration routes through the way that we're designing our mine. And it was a huge part of the way we were getting our license to operate. And then obviously water is very, very important, very pristine water. So you got to renew your water license regularly, and you got to demonstrate that you're actually, the water that you put back into the lake is actually more pure than the one that you take out. It's not about programs, sustainability programs. It's just the way you operate, the way you have to operate if you want to have a license to operate in this kind of places. So, for us, three really important aspects. One is communities, is how we integrate the communities and make them benefit from the work that we're doing, because in turn we're going to need to rely on them and their support and their work to be able to be successful. The second is our employees, and safety is really important when it comes to that. I mean, I'm very proud that as far as the DPA is concerned, it's actually safer to work in one of our 35 mines than it is to go gardening in your garden or doing some handiwork in your kitchen, statistically.
Okay.
And then governments obviously get an important share. So of course we do community programs, we do schooling programs, education, health programs, big Ebola programs during the breakout. HIV/AIDS is a really important theme, but the most important is really the impact we're having through just the way we operate in partnership with communities as responsible custodians of the environment and in symbiosis with local governments.
Oliver, that a lot of what he talked about also applies to hotels, although there is less regulation on how you interact with local communities. But you're a local employer, and your product isn't shipped somewhere else. Everything occurs where the resort is. How do you view Shangri-La's responsibility? And you guys are very well known for taking care of the communities around you. So please tell us about that.
Yeah. I'm happy to. It's a little intimidating going last. And I'll try to introduce some new themes, hopefully. But I do recognize that having a 21-year-old daughter in college, that clearly influence is over after 15. So I have to deal with that fact. And you forgot to make the announcement that in each one of these bags is a diamond. So I'm sorry I didn't bring a gift, worthy of this crowd. But I'll try to compensate in other ways. Thanks for putting this together. I think it's a nice opportunity to talk about this critical topic. For those of you not that familiar with Shangri-La, we own and operate hotels around the world, about a little over 100 hotels. We're primarily a real estate owner and developer, and then operate our own hotels with our own brands. We operate about 520 restaurants around the world. So we have quite a footprint in a way. We're not one of the largest hotel operators by a long shot, but we have a more vertically integrated business model. Our principle is very much guided by the fact that we're a business and we must make a profit, and that profit allows us to fulfill the obligation that you have as a business to reinvest into the communities where we do business. So for us, making a profit is essentially a catalyst to be able to engage with communities and in a sustainable manner. The nature of our company is that we do business in communities, as Chris says. We employ 45,000 employees. Well over 85% of those are in the locations where we have hotels, and then there are people like myself that are not attached to a hotel, but it's a minority of the business. So the symbiosis between profit, people, and planet is critical for us in terms of developing our strategy, which is reaching into the communities where we are an employer and where we essentially run our business. So you ask us what we're most proud of, and maybe I'll comment on that, and that is that we've developed specific programs to allow us to be credibly local. So one of those is we call Embrace, and Embrace is where we partner with local NGOs, hyper-local NGOs, at times the government, and then ourselves as the business partner to make sure that we have the ability to positively impact the communities where we do business. Most of that is around engaging with the human interactions in the community. So where we serve as an employer, and we take that one step further to something we call Embrace Plus Plus, which is where we actually engage with the local community and partner with usually education-oriented NGOs that allow us to do training and development with members of the community with disabilities. So in New Delhi, for example, we partner with a group, with a small local NGO called Noida Home for the Deaf, and we train them, and we now have 16 full-time employees with speech and hearing impairments in our hotel in Delhi that earn a paycheck. They are wonderful members of our teams. They have amazing service spirit. Similar in a location like Kota Kinabalu in Malaysia, where we partner with a local home called the Sabah Cheshire Home. And these are all kids with disabilities, otherwise very difficult to gainfully employ them, so we invest in them. We train them in either, it could be landscaping, it could be housekeeping, it could be in the kitchen, where they then can earn a paycheck and gain independence. One exciting example is when I was there recently, is we launched a small cafe called the Borneo Express. Mm-hmm. And the Borneo Express is a takeaway cafe, and it's run by 3 employees from the Cheshire Home, 3 disabled employees that run this little takeaway cafe. Guests love it. It's becoming more popular than our other cafes, so that's exciting to see.
Jean-Marc, this sounds actually like some of the programs that you have around the mines. I wonder if you could talk about some of your favorite. We talked about the Petra Enterprise Development Resource Center, or maybe the Meroa Diamonds Entrepreneur Institution.
Yeah. What's really important to understand is because we operate in places where very often we are the only source of employment, where we've got to think about what happens when we leave. And so we've got to make sure that we build capabilities and skills that are going to be outliving the mine life, which is going to be typically 10, 20, 30, 40 years. One way to do that is to help businesses, to help people become entrepreneurs and develop entrepreneurial skills that allow them to not only service the mines with goods and services, but also service other sectors and other mines. Mm-hmm. So there are lots of examples, but if you take I'll give you one small example. Imagine in Western Australia, and that's a real case. We need uniforms. We've decided at Argyle Mine we're going to have uniforms. Everyone's going to wear uniforms. So you can go and buy your uniforms in China, or you can ask local Aboriginal people to do uniforms. So we trained a whole team to sew the uniforms and supply the uniforms to us. And it took them 2-3 years to get it right. But after that, they had the whole iron ore mining market to them. And they started supplying first the Rio Tinto mines, because we helped them get to them. But then beyond that, you got the BHP mine, it became actually quite a sizable business, starting just from a small entrepreneurial workshop, just sewing uniforms. That's really important. The other thing that we do is we try to impact skills to them that they don't necessarily need in their current job that we know they're going to need in the future. So, for example, they'd be working a normal shift, and then they'd be taking 3 hours off the next shift, and they'd go to learn how to be a carpenter or any other skill that's not directly relevant to the work that they're doing, but that will allow them in the longer run to go into other businesses. So that's really important. But beyond that, I think the biggest contribution is when you we employ 77,000 people globally. You employ 77,000 people, you buy 90% of what you need locally from local businesses, you got a huge multiplier effect. And we've actually quantified that multiplier effect. It's very, very important. We actually identified that we create about $16 billion of value for local, of which 14 billion go directly to local communities through employment, local sourcing, obviously taxes, royalties, and dividends to governments. So we don't always know where that's going, arguably. But there is a huge share of that value that goes directly or indirectly into the local communities. And that's almost more important than the social programs. We put about $300 million in social programs. They're really, really important. But the real benefit is the association with the activity and the share in the value creation.
Amandine, we were talking about Absolut and the town in Sweden where it's all made. Can you tell us about what you guys do to support that community and how it's sort of all through the supply chain there?
Yeah. So I think what we look at as a company is this notion of purpose-driven brands, and one that is beautiful in our portfolio is Absolut Vodka that I think people don't realize. Absolut Vodka, even though this has become this huge global brand, everything is made 100 miles from Aarhus, Sweden, this small village in Sweden. The grains are from farmers there. The water is taken from Aarhus, Sweden. The glass everything is 100% still from there. And for that brand, we're now launched a campaign where we want to celebrate that. We're calling it Absolut Planet Earth Favorite Vodka. If you actually care about what you drink, that's the vodka that you want to choose. Has supported, and it's funny because we have the same exact format as you do, people, planet, and product. But on people, we've supported the LGBT communities for almost 40 years, long before it was trendy. It was actually very bold and very courageous for a brand to do that. We created the Absolut Rainbow bottle. It was made by the creator of the Pride flag. It's the same that did the Absolut Rainbow bottle. So we still do that today. And on the product is, again, made all in Aarhus, Sweden, no artificial flavor. And on Planet, it is one of the only distilleries in the world that is carbon neutral. So we have no impact on the environment.
So we know from research that 2/3 of millennials and Gen Z will make shopping decisions, or say they will make shopping decisions based on sustainability. But we don't always know how that goes into effect, how that affects how people are making decisions. How do you communicate? How do you make sure people know that about Absolut? That they know it's good and it's sustainable and carbon neutral?
I think especially in our industry, but in general, I think we're not making sustainability cool and sexy enough. And you go to the UN and other conferences, it's very technical. And especially as you're talking to a younger generation, you need to appeal to the consumer in something that really talks to them. So the language that we use as a brand, whether it's on social, the neck tank that you find, or videos or advertising, we say that we're a brand that gives a shit. Instead of we are sustainable, you want to use a certain language. And we've also partnered with Lizzo. If you guys are familiar, we have a new innovation called Absolut Juice, and she has a song called Juice. It's a woman who's body proud and stands for who she is. And so that is a great platform to have someone that's in the culture to talk about it.
And Oliver, you actually get your consumers involved to get that message across. So you were telling me about a turtle hatchery, ways that when people are actually at your resorts, they can become a part of it and really understand the sustainability efforts.
Yeah, I think there's a general global trend that very much plays to our advantage as a luxury hotel operator, and that is in the travel space, luxury is not necessarily anymore about, you just need to have a bigger suite and you need to have of course, an expensive bottle of champagne. But
Yes.
you need, in fact, it's a lot about personal fulfillment and experience. And the premium that travelers pay is to fulfill that, because often that is something aspirational where you take a time out for to sort of educate yourself or gain personal experiences. So what we try to do is, as an example, in our hotel in the Maldives, and I want you to write this all down for your travel plans, is we have a beautiful resort just south of the equator in the Indian Ocean. It's a 50-hectare piece of land where we've signed an agreement with the UNESCO Biodiversity Pact that where we make a commitment to reinvest into the biodiversity of that island, which involves things like coral planting. And so we get our customers, our guests, to come in, put on their snorkeling gear, and we have structures on the water that you can just reach within a couple of feet, and you attach coral seedlings to it, and they actually grow quite quickly. There's usually that general belief that it takes millions of years to grow coral. It's actually not true. You can truly farm them, and our guests get involved, and they snorkel, and they attach the corals, and then we move these contraptions into deeper water over time, where they can grow, and it's wonderful to see, and it's very exciting. And similarly, with the turtle hatchlings, it's a part of that beach is quite popular for turtles to come and lay eggs, and so we have literally this sort of WhatsApp and WeChat alarm system that goes off to all of our guests when our caretakers know that turtles are about to hatch, and we get this congregation on the beach where people can experience this magic moment as to when turtles hatch out of the eggs, and you can see these little creatures scurry off into the ocean. The bigger threat for them is actually the natural predators out there. Only less than 20% make it. It's nothing to do with us, but it has things to do with sharks and all sorts of other things that are out there eating these little things as delicacies. So, but anyway, we give as many of them a fighting chance out as possible, and our guests see that very much as part of the purpose for them to travel to a remote destination. So it's kind of a virtuous circle, and it works very well.
Jean-Marc, I'm just wondering how you communicate with really the world about responsible diamond sourcing. It's something that people, like you said, have some misconceptions about, and how do you get the word out about who's responsible and how these things are traced?
Yeah. So, as you say, there have been a lot of misconceptions, and there's still a lot of misconceptions about the impact that diamonds have, and many of them are legacy issues. I mean, if you think about conflict diamonds, it was 1990s in Liberia, Angola, Sierra Leone, and so on. I mean, these rebel movements don't exist anymore. Problems are very, very different today. They're very different from what they were in the 90s. And to a large extent, the industry has kind of sorted itself out in partnership with governments and NGOs on all these things. But still, I mean, at the moment, right now, people expect more from us, right? They expect to understand what impact we're having globally, and the industry has never really done much to explain that. So the first thing we had to do, frankly, is do our homework. So we went to a company called Trucost in the UK, which is part of the S&P global group, and we asked them to quantify our collective global socioeconomic and environmental impact, which I understand very few industries, if any, have done, kind of collectively putting all the data together and saying, quantify our collective impact. So we've looked at, as I said, the impact of employing people, the impact of working with communities, and obviously our environmental impact. Turned that into a report which we call Total Clarity, because it brings a level of transparency on the industry that's never existed before. And I can tell you it made many of my members very, very nervous when I arrived with a concept, because they didn't think they thought that level of clarity would come and bite them back. Actually, it's exactly the opposite that's happened, because when you're being sincere and you're being transparent and you show the good, the bad, and the ugly, people trust you and give you the benefit of the doubt as long as you explain how you're going to be improving things. So we did that as a good exercise, and then we've been busy communicating that out there to consumers through social media, digital, the media as well, obviously. But what became very, very clear is that people wanted to hear from the communities. They wanted to hear from the people who actually, are part of that ecosystem, and they want to understand the extent to which it's impacted their lives. So going into 2020, it's really going to be about bringing the community, the diamond community, we call it Diamond Faces program, bringing the diamond community all the way from mining down to cutting and polishing in India to talk about the way that diamonds impact their life, the way that it brings them health, it brings education to their kids, brings them kind of long-term employment opportunities, and basically betterment opportunities in their life. I think that's really important to humanize what you're saying, and it's one thing for you to sit down, middle-aged guys with tie or no tie, giving figures. It's another thing to hear from someone who's actually benefiting from this activity and participating in it, and a woman driving a truck in Botswana, or a guy involved in environmental preservation from the communities in northern Canada, and explaining how it works and how he believes in the industry that he's part of is really, really important. So that's really going to be the emphasis.
So we are basically out of time right now because we've got to get you guys down to the main program. I just wanted to thank you guys so very much for being a part of this and for your insights. It's been really great to talk to you. So thank you guys very, very much.
Thanks a lot.